Okay, so it's Dr. Iftekhar could not be here today, so he's recorded. We have his presentation here. So.
Honored to have the opportunity to participate in this significant and timely event organized by the Weavers Studio. I extend my sincere thanks to Ms. Darshan Shah for not only inviting me, but for her visionary leadership and dedication in promoting textile heritage of this region. I must also thank her remarkable team, including Mr. Mayank Kaul, who's here in this panel, for the tireless efforts and attention, dedication for this event. In terms of my topic, which is navigating strengths and opportunities in the GI protocol between Bangladesh and India. Most of us are already familiar with some of the areas of discomfort between the two countries. To sum this up, GI-related strains between Bangladesh and India emerged for the first time when India registered a textile in Andhra Pradesh under the name of Uppada Jamdani sometime in 2008 or 9. Later on, in West Bengal, Bangla Rosgulla, this unique sweet of this region, was registered in 2017. Nokshikatha was registered in 2019. And then we had in the last year, we had West Bengal registering Tangail Shari of Bengal, Sundarban Honey, and Banglar Muslin. For each of these cases, several issues have been into play in the stressed relationship between the GI regime of the two countries. I would suggest this can be attributed to asymmetric power relations between the two neighbors, weak internal GI governance protocol, internal political contexts, lack of track 1 and track 2 diplomatic conversations between the two countries, and so on. From the Bangladesh side, for example, in response to West Bengal's Bangla Rosgulla, Bangladesh has registered Rosgulla of Gopalganj. And Gopalganj is more famous for being the district town of the immediate past Prime Minister of Bangladesh than Rosgulla itself. Rosgulla is largely a Bangladesh-wide thing like in West Bengal. And this registration was obviously informed by Bangladesh's internal political reality than a well-thought-out GI specific decision. Bangladesh could have easily registered it as the Rosgulla of Bangladesh or Bangladeshi Rosgulla. In response to West Bengal's Nokshikatha registration of Nokshikatha as the term Nokshikatha, Bangladesh registered Jamalpur Nokshikatha in 2019. Again, Jamalpur has never enjoyed fame as an exclusive Nokshikatha zone in Bangladesh. Like Rosgulla, this has been a Delta-wide product. And this registration was either ill-informed or ill-judged or done in a rush to respond to India's registration. But one point is clear through these examples and other listing in Bangladesh, that Bangladesh has never registered an item that would merit contestations from India, unlike the case from India's side. While these examples reflect some challenges, of course, within the Bangladesh GI governance, I would suggest that there was room for a more cautious and responsible role from India's GI regime in terms of items with potential conflicts with Bangladesh. I'll briefly discuss the issues of Jamdani, Nokshikatha, and Tangal Shari. In terms of Jamdani, I may not have come across any document otherwise, but my research didn't suggest that historically, at least until about the mid-20th century, there was any item called Uppada Jamdani, not even in Andhra Pradesh. By late colonial times, when the report of the fact-finding committee on handloom and mills was published in 1942, some areas perhaps began to mimic Jamdani, like in Bihar and Orissa or Faizabad in UP. But Dhaka still remained the quintessential preserve of Jamdani Shari, as the committee report itself suggested. If GI is a combination of ecological, historical, and geographical factors in a smooth way, then Jamdani remains a Dhaka GI product. But if any other place name can be tagged with Jamdani inside India, that shouldn't be a cause of conflict either, as long as a seamless historical, ecological, and geographical lineage could be established. And that is highly, I would suggest, improbable. So this remains a moot question of whether Jamdani could be used as a generic GI tag for product other than those from Dhaka. In terms of Tangal Shari of Bengal, as registered under the West Bengal GI regime, is a misnomer, as a champagne of Nadia would be. I think those who registered it by this name were informed by the mobility question, which is an important question. After the partition, many Boshak caste members settled in Kolkata and Nadia region from Tangail. From that point of view, there is some rationale behind such registration or registration by such name. But this will invite a few questions that we need to answer. First, it's not clear if the Global GI Protocol right away accommodates the disassociation of intangible human skills from a specific geospatial location. Secondly, before their post-colonial migration to West Bengal, the Boshaks were themselves migrant to East Bengal, Dhaka and Tangail region from 19th century onward. But that doesn't make them original Boshaks. I use the term original with caution. From James Wise, we learned that the Tantuvai of Dhaka assume, I quote here, the title of Boshak, which was originally taken by the rich persons who had given up weaving and became cloth merchants. But the fact is that the title of Boshak existed long before the Tantuvais went to Dhaka and gave up the art of weaving. So, unquote. Wise in 1883 also suggested that in Dhaka, some Tantibais or Tati caste were able to upgrade themselves as caste. In 1896, Jogendranath Bhattacharya suggested, following Risley and Wise, that the Boshak was the surname of the higher caste Tantis of Dhaka, some of whom are now settled in Calcutta. So it's difficult to ascertain which Boshaks were the real Tangile weavers, as the term and the people associated with it have gone through remarkable historical mobility and transformations. And thirdly, Monohar Boshak recently has suggested that in Fulia in Shantipur in Nodia, the weavers were mostly from Tangail. And by this logic, Bangladesh can also claim that Shantipur Shari is Bangladesh's, although this hasn't happened yet. In this case, too, I think there arises a moot question about how migration can carry a complex genealogy as to the GI protocol. Finally, on Nakshikatha, the registration of Nakshikatha as a GI product in West Bengal raises critical issues about cultural heritage and shared geographies. And this decision appeared to follow the logic of territorial national priority than respecting larger shared cultural heritage. No doubt, Nakshikatha is a product universally tied to the monsoonal domesticity of across the delta. Yet it must be noted, I think you would agree, that it was more predominant in eastern Bengal, especially Joshore, Faridpur, Mayank and Rajshahi area, roughly the lower Ganges, Padda and Jamuna and the Howard Basin below Sylhet, the cultural product of these regions. And Professor Niaz Zaman can enlighten us about this from her expertise of the subject, as she's speaking, I think, today or tomorrow. As we know, Nakshikatha is part of a larger tradition of Naksha, or the design, that spans the Bengal Delta. And the term Nakshi is derived from the word Naksha, and is applied across various traditional crafts, including Nakshi Pankha, decorated hand fans, Nakshi Pati, decorated mats, and the Nakshi Sika, decorated pot hangers. So specimens, for an example, specimens from Nakshikatha from Faridpur, housed in the Bangladesh National Museum and the Guru Shodai Museum in Kolkata, where there are more than 200 specimens from other regions, affirm its deep roots in eastern Bengal region. So I would conclude now. I would suggest that, and I'm delighted that Dr. Ritu Sethi is here, as she is well equipped to provide insights on the way forward. I would just like to propose that the formation, there should be a joint Bangladesh-India GI task force, while a forum like SARC-wide task force would have been ideal for the purpose. Its current viability is obviously uncertain. But the Bangladesh-India task force could address sensitive issues, ensuring that concerns over infringing on each other's GI domain are carefully evaluated, and to recommend strategies that highlight the mutual benefits of traders as well as the primary producers. Additionally, as we discussed initially with colleagues at Weavers Studio some time ago, as we're discussing this event, we should consider the broader questions of how to understand the past in relation to the present within the geographical issues that were once shared, and geographical features that we once shared, but now reflect distinct social and political and economic trajectories. Once we have that, then there are also promising avenues for fostering cooperation that lies in addressing ecological concerns. The Bengal Delta, comprising and encompassing both Bangladesh and West Bengal, along with its adjacent mountain zones, is intricately, linked through the interconnected river systems. When we discuss heritage, like Muslin and Jamdani, we are not merely referring to their designs or motifs, but also to the quality of the cotton and the traditional process and equipments, tools, such as the specialized washing methods during the preparation. And if we keep those things in mind, it would be obvious that the ecological dynamics of the old Brahmaputra River and its connection to the Shitalakha are critical. However, the ever-increasing construction of dams and other infrastructure and the industrial pollution, both upstream in India and downstream in Bangladesh, has compromised these essential environmental elements conducive to textile industries in the Bengal Delta region. While our nation states continue to engage in disputes over GI tax, the very ecological foundations that sustain such heritage are being steadily eroded. So this underscores an urgent need for dialogues and collaboration between the governments of Bangladesh and India, as well as between non-government stakeholders like ourselves, by prioritizing the protection and restoration of shared ecological commons. I think we can ensure the preservation of this heritage and the environmental systems upon which they depend. I would stop here, and I must thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
This was a recorded message, yes, but you will be interested to know that he will be joining us on Zoom for the question and answer session. So keep your questions ready. It is now time to call Dr. Sethi up on stage for her presentation, followed by a conversation with Mr. Kaul.
No. So a huge thank you to Darshan Shah, Weavers Resource Center, and to Mayank Mansingh Kaul for inviting me to speak today. I also wish to thank Professor Iftekhar for providing us with such a clear understanding of the issues. And as we are both speaking on the same topic, I will be skipping some parts to avoid repetition. So perhaps my intervention may seem a bit disjointed, for which I apologize in advance. I have 12 minutes to submit my argument, so I've divided my paper into 3 parts. In the first, a bit of legalese to set the stage, the second on shared traditions, and the third, some concluding thoughts. As signatories to the World Trade Organization, India, Bangladesh, and other countries additionally ratified the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or the TRIPS agreement. And by doing so, in 1995, the first multilateral treaty dealing with GIs came into global force. This definition, formulated by TRIPS, that is on the screen, forms the base that has been subsequently tweaked by signatories to suit their national contexts and agendas. India was an early adopter in 2003. Bangladesh followed a decade later in 2013. This widely ratified 1995 TRIPS agreement was of great interest in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America, as for the first time, it included an extension of the original concept of GIs to now include products of heritage, arts, crafts, textiles, and industrial products, connecting them to a geography. As we all know, the very DNA of GI lies in the produce of the earth, wines, spirits, and agricultural products. Its first laws being enacted in 1919 and subsequently adopted, but contained within this boundary. In its long history, huge tussles have taken place on ownership. For with migrating populations, as it has been termed, from the old world, really Europe, to the new world, essentially America and Australia, where migrants brought with them skills, mastery, and indeed plants and seeds, transplanting both the methods of making the products and their geographical names in good faith to their new homes to use their inheritance and knowledge. And therein lies the conundrum that we have to unravel. For now, more than 100 years on, what we are essentially debating today is a similar issue, but added to this mix is the potent combination of heritage, history, culture. So before I move on, I step back to provide another perspective on the GI extension in the TRIPS agreement and why countries of the global south that are repositories of traditions of crafting, who have vibrant living traditions, argued vociferously for this addition, which, by the way, was not easy to come back because there were arguments to the contrary not to include it. So why does GI matter? It matters because products of traditional knowledge are not protected by conventional intellectual property systems, neither trademarks, copyrights, not patents, and not by other instruments, because they are collective, oral, and intergenerational in character, and therefore relegated to the public domain and excluded from IP systems. So unless a country has set in place its own sui generis laws, or a special or specific kind of law for protection, like Kenya, Mexico, Peru, and several other countries have, this new avatar of the GI is currently the only multilateral intellectual property right that is applicable for community-owned intellectual rights. Why this is so is a long and bitter tale, but it's another story for another day. But I will add here that this exclusion from IP systems has had an enormous and detrimental impact on products of heritage and their makers. And from a long list, I will just list two. First, as products of traditional knowledge were not protected, it made copying a profitable business. For here was a freely available emporium of prototypes that required no investment in product development. Goods with instant recognition and ageless appeal, with cultural and symbolic values that added up to a sum greater than its parts. that could be duplicated with no fear of reprisal. This made copying a win-win business model. And second, artisans bereft of a legal umbrella could not stop third parties duplicating their products. And so, for weavers, craftspeople, and their communities who have been at the receiving end of this freeloading, it has led to not only enormous economic loss, but even greater, a loss over their ancestral property, which is the collective knowledge of their forefathers. This being further compounded by feelings of marginalization and helplessness due to their inability to prevent or effectively deal with this copying and faking. So while we complain about its GI and its gaps, and rightly so, for its fundamentals are historically oriented towards agricultural produce and not to traditional knowledge products, it is the first, and I hope, of more regulatory frameworks to protect crafts, textiles, and community knowledge, giving collective rights and ownership to producers. Now, coming back to South Asia with its shared history and its profound interconnectedness. Communities bound by threads of shared ancestry, colonial legacies, and geographical contiguity, where its patterns of migration have created cultural links that defy borders. Festivals, linguistic overlaps, culinary affinities, and shared craft and artistic traditions underscore the intertwined nature of these histories. For when celebrated, shared cultures across political boundaries reflect commonalities of collective meaning, identities, and transnational interconnectedness. At its best, allowing for exchange of ideas, knowledge, skills, and material manifestations between people and nations. On the other hand, this complex tapestry of economic, social, and cultural transnational connection can often lead to disquiet about authenticity, heritage, and location, to ripple across borders that could, in the present and in the future, become a contentious matter between neighbors. This issue has come to the fore with the adoption of the IPR of GI across Asia. And while geographic areas are often demarcated by consistent cultural traditions, given the history of migration, these transportable traditions, where ideas, people, skills flow across borders, is our reality. And Professor Iftekhar has spoken at length about the Jamdani, Tangal Sari, Nakshikantha, so I will not add any further details here, but look forward to questions. But this is not our reality alone. Indonesia and Malaysia are arguing over batik. The Ikat is being argued over in Southeast Asia. And as we speak, Germany and Turkey have up to 6 months to hammer out a compromise on the doner kebab, which has resulted in what has been termed as a spicy feud, with heads of state issuing statements about whose doner kebab it is. So when we part the veil of emotion and jingoism to examine the issue, what remains clear is a letter of the law, which states the principle of territoriality, that these GIs under the TRIPS agreement are only applicable and generally limited to the country where the GI is located and not outside its borders. And I use the term generally limited for unless bilateral international GI agreements are negotiated between countries, an Indian GI holds power within its sovereign territory alone, as do the GIs of other countries. In addition, at WTO and at TRIPS, there is no planned discussion yet to further extend the TRIPS agreement or the creation of a multilateral registry for GIs. So at present, what is within your border stays within your border. For communities, their products of traditional knowledge are not just cherished cultural, social, and historical assets, they are also valuable economic assets for income generation and development. The very purpose of the GI is to protect these trade-related rights, allowing them, the holders of these rights, to accrue the economic benefits from their creation. It works towards not only protecting and defending against unfair competition, but additionally helping to preserve the cultural identity and interests of the holders of these rights. For consumers, the purpose of the GI tag is to ensure that they are getting a genuine product rather than an imitation. And for those who imitate, it legally protects GI tag products against misleading and deceptive trading practices by safeguarding the market for legitimate producers who suffer when business is taken away from them by imitators. The benefits, as seen from research conducted on established global GIs, is that it improves livelihoods, results in a remunerative marketing of products, rewards tradition while allowing for continued evolution. And while the jurisprudence relating to this extended GI has been evolving, the fundamental that must continue to lie at its very heart is to keep the interest of the craftsperson and weavers, the bearers of these traditions, first and foremost, while providing guarantees to consumers on the genuineness and quality of the product. So what we need to do within our national boundaries is to build effective frameworks for GI protection, ensuring that they are managed wisely by producers and their communities. Only in this way can South Asia reap the benefits of the adoption of GI protection. I conclude by saying that while political boundaries may draw lines across maps, the lived experiences, skills, and collective memories of people illustrate that history is not so easily contained. The story of this region is a testament to the resilience of cultural continuity that I hope will serve as a quiet but powerful reminder of the bonds that unite rather than divide. Thank you.
History cannot be contained, yes. Dr. Sethi, I would request you to please stay on stage for the conversation with Mr. Kaul.
Thank you, Dr. Iqbal. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome to the symposium. It's a pleasure to have you join us from Brunei, and it was great to listen into your presentation, Dr. Iqbal. And
thank you very much for having me. I can hear you, but not very clearly, though. It's if the volume could be increased a bit. I can hear you, but not so strong.
Yeah. Okay. I'm also going to try and speak closer to the mic.
Okay.
Does that help?
Slightly better, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's go. Yeah.
Dr. Iqbal, I'd first like to invite you. Would you have any questions or comments for Dr. Sethi here? I don't know if you had the chance to listen into her presentation.
Of course, I listened to it with rapt attention, and I learned a number of things, and I think that's very enlightening. I think there are, as Dr. Sethi was suggesting, we have tensions, but also there are a lot of opportunities for conversations, particularly in the context of transborder GI issues. I think this term transborder GIs are coming into fore recently, but it's not yet clear how does it work out. And I wonder if Dr. Sethi could say a few words about this emerging transborder issues, transborder GIs, particularly in the context of West Bengal and Bangladesh.
Well, it's interesting, Professor Iftekhar, that you asked me this question because one of the other things I work on is on the UNESCO 2003 Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage, which is also called Living Heritage. And there too, these arguments continue. While the extension of the GI will depend on long negotiations at WTO, and I don't know if they are at present on the card. My last reading showed that they were not present, but perhaps things have changed and perhaps someone else can enlighten us on that. But what I will talk about is how traditions are being shared across borders through an instrument that is not legal, but is actually very fraught and has resulted in a lot of discussion. Because again, migrating populations and connections have resulted in arguments at international levels once a year when the meetings are held as to who owns what. But because there is a constant discussion without legalities involved, they have sorted it out very well. For instance, India led the delegation on the celebration of Zoroastrian festivals, and it is now a multilateral nomination across more than 12 countries. Similarly, there are many others, including Arabic coffee, which is across 4 countries, and falcon racing, and many others. However, in this region, we have not yet had a multinational nomination. This is in spite of Bangladesh getting baul singing as intangible cultural heritage. Jamdani was also established as an intangible cultural heritage by Bangladesh, as was, I think, Nakshikantha. So we haven't had this conversation in spite of these regular year-on-year meetings. So you're right. There needs to be, as you said in your talk, track 1 and track 2 conversations. Because by talking, we can sort things out. They don't need to reach a situation where they become contentious. So I hope I've been able to answer a bit of what you've asked for.
If I may, Dr. Iqbal and Dr. Sethi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Would you allow me to grab my earphone? Because that might help. Just a second, please. Yeah.
I'm going to wait for Dr. Iqbal to join us because I wanted to bring up a question on Jamdani. So I'd like his inputs on that as well. There you go.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
So, recent research by Twam Foundation on the Petni yielded that help me out here. From the Tanjore family in the 19th century, a new detail has emerged that it was actually he, one of the Rajas, the Tanjore Maharajas, he actually introduced Jamdani weaving from Bengal to the south of India. And this is now a 19th century reference. We know that Paitanis have been using what we may, identify visually as Jamdani in central and western India for a long time, and we know about the Venkatgiri tradition. So on the question of Jamdani itself, Dr. Iqbal, when we have, this kind of very large and shared experience, we know that by the 19th century, Varanasi was also using the kind of extra weft technique that is referred to as the Jamdani. So in this question of the Upara Jamdani and Jamdani, which has been GI registered in Bangladesh, how do we sort of fit in these kinds of expanding knowledges and informations and insights that come, that become available to us? Specifically more, related to the Jamdani question. This is a question for both of you, Dr. Iqbal and Dr. Sethi.
Well, I will also add that we need to bring Nepal into this mix, because Nepal too had a Jamdani tradition. And in fact, when the former king got married, he wore a Jamdani topi, and it's on their postage stamps and on other places. So there are many traditions of Jamdani, because weavers traveled. I mean, they weren't cemented to a place. They traveled where business took them. They carried their looms, or the looms could be built where they went. So, yeah, and so Upara Jamdani is and the more we read, the more we research, the more we go through archives, we find more and more traditions shared within the country, within the political boundaries, and across borders.
Dr. Iqbal, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. I think, that's what we have been thinking of when I was doing my research about Jamdani in 2014 with Center for Policy Dialogue. A couple of years before, when Bangladesh was successfully contesting this registration in India. I think, well, there is this generic, this property of generic property that can be attributed to different places. But I think there is a whole baggage of history, ecology, and instrumentality, material instrumentality by which these things are woven together. I think there are certain specificity that are connected to the certain geographical locations. So I think the water, the particular intangible skills that are also dependent on those ecology, and the kind of bamboo based instruments, and a whole lot of things that are being used to produce some form of textile in the name of Jamdani in Dhaka may not be identical to many other places. So how do we really argue that Dhaka Jamdani has a particular pedigree? That's the thing that we can continue to debate. But if there is one thing that can help us guide in this matter, maybe history, the lineage, how long we go, and particularly where do this very term Jamdani comes. And we can say that it is the like we do nowadays, this European and American buying houses comes to Bangladesh and order for particular things from the ready-made garment sector, they used to do the same thing in 15th century, 16th century. The Persian merchants were here and they were giving ideas, and that was being synthesized with local ecology and context and the marketing. So when we know that Delhi Mughal princesses were ordering the special jamdani from nowhere other than Dhaka. So this historical lineage and genealogies and this ecological context all together, I feel that makes jamdani jamdani. So we can definitely add Uppada, we can definitely add Kathmandu or Nepal Jamdani or anywhere. There is no issue with that. But I think Jamdani remains Jamdani, and that's why this very protocol of GI protocol is here to detect and to protect this kind of claims. So just to give you more, maybe a very lighter example, that if Toyota is assembled in Indonesia, it doesn't make it a Japanese product, right? So that is something important to keep note of. Dr. Sethi was suggesting that there was this letter, the letter of the law. So our problem is that this law itself is, as Dr. Sethi was suggesting also, is not really well defined yet. And there are also these issues of, let's say, who is into the legal regime in what footing. So Bangladesh, India has become a party to the Geneva, I think Geneva Protocol of 2019. But I think Bangladesh is yet to be a signatory to that. So when all these members and parties are legally at par, maybe there might be more discussions and solutions to some of these tensions. So I would stop there, but I hope that this doesn't stop our conversations at different forums. Thank you.
Dr. Sethi, thank you for that, Dr. Iqbal. You mentioned soil as being very intrinsic to some of these products that have a GI registration. Recently, we've seen that wines, which have been grown in a particular region of the world and had a GI there, the vineyards have been infested with problems. And because there was grafting of those grapes done, and then those kinds of wines were taken to another part of the world, and they were produced there, and they were grown there, now those parts of the world are going to bail these regions out. Do you think this requires us to have, GI protocols, rules, and regulations which are more open, adaptive, and is this something that can work out in today's world? Is it something that is required?
This is a very complicated question, and I'll tell you why. When the GI Act, it wasn't called GI then, it had many other terms. When it came in, it was actually 1905, then got rectified 1919, and it carried on. It was strictly related to, as I said, wine, spirits, and agricultural products. And this wine, spirits, and agricultural products is actually an extended GI, which means it applies globally. Whereas the GI that we are working with for traditional products applies only within the territory of the country. So, as Professor Iftekhar also said, it is poorly defined. Its DNA is in spirits, wine, and land, soil, weather, and other microclimate that controls it. So I had said that we need special laws, these sui generis laws. And Kenya has protected its kente cloth. Peru, Mexico, they have special sui generis laws for specific traditional knowledge products that are tailored to them and protect them. And again, it works within a sovereign territory, so you have to have multilateral agreements with other countries where you say our law will also apply there, and that goes into the level of diplomacy. So it's very complex, actually. So,
Dr. Iqbal, if you may allow me, just closer home to India, Dr. Sethi, what are some of the prominent examples of GI registrations in the context of handmade or hand patterned textiles? And have there been landmark cases? Have there been interesting judgments, contestations? If you could give some examples of such Indian traditions.
well, thanks for that question. We have leapt into the GI regime with great gusto. So we already have, I think, more than 650 GIs, and there are 650 in the pipeline. Of these, more than 50% are crafts and textiles. However, the understanding of GI is still developing. So there are 3 or 4 parts of it. One is you apply for a GI, you have a lawyer, you put together the papers, and it has to be done legally because it is a law, it is an act. And you have to produce the documentation to show that you fit into the GI Act. And by the way, many have fallen on the wayside. So you have. The second part is there has to be authorized users. And anyone within that geographical territory can apply. I think it's a modest amount of 20 rupees. So anyone can apply to be an authorized user within that territory. And therein again lies the problem. I'll give you a small example. When they applied for Theva, for instance, which we know is made in Pratapgarh in Rajasthan, one of the brothers had moved to Madhya Pradesh. So by the letter of the law, he can't call what is his ancestral knowledge Theva. So you see how ill-suited it is. So like Professor Iftekhar was saying, why is Upara called a Jamdani? But they've got a GI, so they have the right to call it. So there are many such examples. Like we can also have an example now of Ikkat in Kashmir, because we are weaving Ikkat in Kashmir. Like every time I go to a shawl wala, I see Ikkat. So it's a question of time before we have Ikkat in Kashmir. So there are many examples like this. But one of the first GIs in textiles was Pochampalli Ikkat. Since then, we've had many other traditions applied for. But there is a third part to it. So first is the legal, then is the authorized user, and the third, and the most complicated, is certification. So we can all be producing this, we can all be in this particular territory, but who is going to certify that what you have stated is the process is what has been followed? So if there is, and there is a GI for block printing, and say I'm printing it by screen in my backyard, someone has to certify that this has not been done by screen or by roller, but it has been done by block printing. And there are just a few places where they have set up this certification, and one of them is Kashmir, where they have certified, they've got a certification unit made for Pashmina. But not many go to get that certification. And when you see that certification, you know that the price will be quite high. But there is a certification. And most cases have been settled out of court because at present, the law states that if you are caught cheating and faking, it's 6 months behind bars or a fine of rupees 50,000. So I'm actually looking forward to see what happens in the future. So this conversation will continue.
I was quite, it was quite interesting. I was in Varanasi a few months back, and I was told that there is a lot of chanderi being sold in Varanasi today. But the trade term for what they refer to as chanderi is not necessarily fabric which is made in Chanderi in Madhya Pradesh. It is actually the construction of using silk in the warp and cotton in the weft, or the other way around. So it's this combination which has become a very distinct feature of the Chanderi and is an element in the registration of Chanderi to identify what is a Chanderi. So these kinds of, so there's a trade reference which emerges, and then there's a GI reference which emerges. And then, you know, in a gathering like this, we know that there are historical and academic references. How can these various sort of stakeholders or partitioners in, you know, participants in this ecology actually talk more to each other? It's a question to both Dr. Iqbal and Dr. Sethi.
I've spoken a lot. Perhaps Professor Iftekhar would like to answer.
I think Dr. Sethi is probably more well-placed than, than me to answer this question. Actually, I haven't been researching on this for a long time. We worked on Jamdani many years ago now, almost a decade ago. So I'm not quite sure if my answer would be substantial. But I think, as I was saying in my talk, to the end of my talk, we need to understand the South Asian ecology as a commons, particularly this dhal, this basin ecology we're talking about, connecting Assam, West Bengal, and Bangladesh. You know, the particular sediment that I mean, these rivers carry is not only just a physics of sediment, but also, I don't know, there are a lot of chemistry, there are a lot of chemical particles that are actually coming through this sediment from, and these were in turn were, you know, it was triggered by this formation of the whole geological formation of the Himalayas 50 million years ago. So it has a deep history. And this is this chemistry, this is these particles, prehistoric particles that goes into the production of a particular tula, the Karpash tula. And that is something that is key to the classic form of Jamdani, you know, I mean, Jamdani and muslin. All these are going or eroded, gone, because a large part, it's not only because intangible skills are being eroded. Actually, in fact, intangible skills are still there because it is intergenerational, as Dr. Sethi was suggesting. But I think I'm afraid mostly because the threat posed to the ecology. And this ecology of this region has to be seen as a trans-regional commons, not as national property. So once we secured this ecology of this upland and lowland, this delta and the surrounding mountain regions, I think once we have a look at this holistically, and we consider this as ecological commons, transnational and transboundary ecological commons, then I think there will be a lot of opportunities for the revival of some of the heritage we're talking about here today. So I think we need to think about the well-being and nurturing of intangible human skills. But at the same time, we need to think about the ecological, elemental ecology that fits into this heritage. So I think I would say that both this needs to go together. And to achieve this, I think we need to go beyond the mistrust and missteps. Even if there is, even if we are not, I'm talking about India and Bangladesh, are not members of some certain global forum, we can, because of the very record of sharing shared heritage, we can sit together, we can talk, we can open a conversations at two different levels. And that can help a lot before we go to international trade regime. But I think we all need to think about all these layered issues. Thank you.
So I'm going to step back a bit and not answer your question obliquely. And I want to go back to the fact that this is the only community-related IPR we have. It works within the sovereign territory of a nation. It doesn't work outside your borders. So let's make it work. Let's make it work. So these traditions that we keep talking about are vanishing, are dying. Nobody wants to work at it anymore. There is so much copying and faking. Why don't we work on improving things? Why don't we work on getting certification labs and getting the GI to work? Yes, it is flawed, as you can see, if we go back into history and prehistory and try and prove authenticity. There are many fraught issues that don't work. But we have something, and we need to make it work.
I think that's a good note to open up the discussion to participants and delegates. Do we have any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Yeah, may we have the mic for Sonia, please?
Thank you very much for very illuminating and insightful talks. My question is, what are we protecting with Jamdani? Because, as you've mentioned, the supplementary weft technique is actually fairly universal. It even occurs in remote Guatemala. And so, and there is the Jamdani technique. So is it a question of protecting the motifs, some of which are shared with India? Or what is it exactly that GI is protecting I'd like to know. I mean, I'm sympathetic, but I'd like to know.
Each of the legal GI documents has a list of questions that have to be answered. The first is its location geographically and how you have to prove with historical documents that it was located there over a certain period of time. Then you put in the process, and yes, you put in the motives too. And therefore, that too worries me a bit, because does it mean that we reduce inventiveness? That if we have listed, let's say the Kantha stitch, let's say there is a new stitch that they have added because they are so creative and brilliant and amazing. Does that exclude it? When a certification is done, they say, excuse me, wrong stitch. So this is still being sorted out, because not having certification and inspection units in place, not having a case that has come to court, that is when amendments will take place. That is when questions will be answered. But the other additional interesting thing is that the GI is applicable only for 10 years. So we in India applied for, it was enacted in 1999. By the time it came into force, 2003, and like I said, since then, rapid adoption. But so almost 20 years have passed. So the GIs have been reapplied for. So in the beginning, there was less thought because we were all learning the process. So now I think that when you see the revised GI applications, they come with a branding, because now they have a brand name that is put in. And I think they're working towards sorting these things out and changing things around. But it is still a very new jurisprudence. So.
Dr. Iqbal, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Dr. Sethi has already covered what he wanted to say. And this is particularly important to understand that this is a 10-year, renewable thing. Although we know some of these products have been there for millennia, but this very, 10-year thing makes it imperative that we nurture what we have, and not to stop on heritage only, but to build on the heritage. So let's say for Jamdani, 19 or 18 or 17 or 16th century Jamdani motif has not remained in a constant. There are new things, new innovativeness, new ideas have popped in. But what is important, I would say that, again, I would repeat that the cotton that the Dhaka district used to produce are no longer there. So some of the organizations, some individuals are trying to revive the muslins, and they had some exhibition. They have visited the British Museum to find some of the specimen from the 19th, 18th century. So what I would suggest, just to add to Dr. Sethi, is that we need to remain open to this opportunity for reinvention, innovation and innovations and reincarnations. But at the same time, we need to try to see if we can revive some of the ecological basis for some of the backward linkages, like the good cotton karpash tula. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. So yes, may we have, yeah.
Hi.
I also want to request, when you ask a question, if you could briefly introduce yourself.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I'm Shwetashri. I am an IP lawyer, so GI is literally what I do every day. So, yeah, well, it's not as common as the other forms of IP. But I'm also currently involved in an interesting international GI litigation in court. So it is actually quite litigated. So this involves PISCO between Chile and Peru. But I want to unpack a couple of concepts as quickly as I can. What's very important is often we approach a conversation around GI through the lens of what we understand as trademark. And so we see it through lenses of exclusivity, exclusive ownership. That's not what GI is about. So it's not about if India has a registration under what is a domestic law that excludes Bangladesh. That's untrue. What is important to understand is that GI has always been understood, like Rituji said, under the TRIPS agreement, we had baselines for alcoholic beverages. Those baselines everyone had to agree on. If you wanted to go beyond that and lay down a domestic law to cover other forms of products, you could, and that's what India has chosen to do. Now, Bangladesh has not chosen to enact a domestic law on GI. So if you look at Bangladesh's designation of Jamdani, it's a national, it's almost like a notification saying Jamdani is hereby notified. That is very different from a legal process where you apply under the process, go through a process of scrutiny, so fulfill certain conditions, and then get a GI certificate. The GI authority is not sitting there, the GI office is not sitting there to determine whether you own a craft or not. It is about whether you fulfill certain thresholds. History is a very relative term. It doesn't matter whether a particular craft is 800 years old, 1,000 years old, or even 100 years old. If something is 100 years old in a particular region, you can still apply for GI. It's not true that only a place that historically has a particular origin can apply. The question is, in migration, what happens is people carry certain concepts and techniques and they bring them with them to a new place. They adapt those concepts and techniques, and that particular trade continues in that new place, that craft continues in that new place under new characteristics. So let's be honest about it. Today, if Bangladesh were to apply for, say the Dhaka Jamdani, theoretically, under India's GI law, the domestic law, if they were to apply in India, would they be able to apply with the same characteristics as the original Jamdani, for example, the soil or the water from the river or the putti karpash cotton? The answer is no. So today's application would factor in all of those ingredients and techniques that are prevalent today. So if you look at the Tangai registration that West Bengal has, for example, it has been broadened so much, and Rituji, this refers to what you were talking about earlier. There's a great risk of broadening it because they've broadened it. If you look at the GI registration document, I sort of recommend all of you go see it. They've given a wide range of what they call traditional motifs and modern motifs. The modern motifs include Mickey Mouse, I kid you not. And it talks about, so they've given like a range of things that it could possibly cover. And they've also given a range of, for example, yarn. And so it says synthetic yarn. So it's basically, if you look at the definition of Tangai under the West Bengal registration, it is cotton, silk, wool, synthetic yarn, old motifs, modern motifs, extra weft, jacquard, machine. So what is left, right? So it's very important that when you're having a conversation about any of these individual GIs, look at what protection has been sought, what has been obtained, what is the geographical extent of the protection that has been granted, how is it to be enforced? Without those questions, the conversation remains esoteric. Sorry, that was a longer comment.
Thank you for that. And also for the various whats, the whys. I think on that note, yeah, do we? Okay.
It's okay. Actually, my question was, I'm Manisha Ahmed. My question was actually also around the same themes that the previous person who asked made the comment also commented on, because I was looking at something like Kashmir that you mentioned, or Pashmina. I mean, how does GI work when we look at history, for instance? Maybe the question is more to Ritu, because in Kashmir, the GI registration for Pashmina has Mongolian Pashmina listed. Whilst we know historically Kashmir was buying Pashmina from Western Tibet. So, how does history play a role in this GI registration? And then obviously we come down to design and process and all that later, but even as a source of material, even, you talked about soil and agriculture, but then what about livestock? What about goats in the case of Pashmina, or Shatouche, which also don't know any borders. They breed in India, but then the fiber is collected or they're killed for their fiber in Tibet, or China-occupied Tibet. So how does it work with animals? How does it work with sort of the source of products? Yeah.
Thank you for that, Monisha. I think we have to keep in mind that it's trade-related and it's current. So they look back, and when they give the process that they may write its history as part of the sections they have to fill in, but when they give the process, they write what material is being currently used. So that therein lies the whole thing, that you refer to the history, but the process remains what is currently to be looked at by the certification unit that will give it the brand of Kashmir Pashmina. I hope that answers it.
Mayank, can I just add a few words?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that refers to some earlier conversation. It is very important to understand that legal point of view cannot be disassociated from the prospects of transboundary conversation. So when something is registered in India, it doesn't mean the legality is blind to its neighboring countries where there is potential shareholding. So if something is registered in India, is this happening because there is no conversation with the neighbors, or is it a blind thing that, okay, this is my sovereignty, this is my territory, I will do something that has to be done within its own national terms and condition. That is very legalistic understanding. But then if we exclude the question of three things: ecology, intangible skills, and history, these three things together, if we disassociate this with any nationalistic legal framework, then I think that can invite a lot of other issues. Then Bangladesh or Nepal can actually ask for registration from many things that goes to the subcontinental spaces across India, Pakistan. So I think we need to have a holistic vision, a strong legal perspective, which is needed, but that comes at the end of the story, where history, ecology, and intangible elements have this weightage. Then legal questions come. So I think it would be helpful to be open to all these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Iqbal. And Dr. Sethi, over to you. Oh gosh,
Thank
do we
you.
have time for this? I'm sorry, we'll have to close now because I think we're over time. I think these conversations can happen over lunch. Also, there will be a roundtable tomorrow where all the participating speakers and panelists will be here, so perhaps some of these questions could be raised formally then as well. I'm really sorry, but we're out of time. Thank you both for being with us.